Jutta Weimar, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Miriam. Nice to see you. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm really looking forward to being in conversation with you and open to whatever there is to emerge. I have no doubt that we will run out of topics.
That's true. Yeah.
And I am very curious to hear your story. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
Oh, that's a good question. When did I start calling myself that way? I think it might be like 10 years ago. No, sorry, 25. Oh, my dear.
I was like, 10 years, this sounds short.
25, I think it's about 25 years ago that was during my studies. At the end of my studies, I learned that there is a role called moderator or facilitator. In German, we have the two terms, and I was just really intrigued, interested. I found it really interesting, and I was really wondering how can that happen, that a role like this exists even. I was very interested in getting more about it, and yeah, so at that time that was maybe 30 years ago, sorry for that. But then I started to be more interested and getting into the subject more and more. And then, in a way, I started to be a trainer first, but I've always wanted to know about the idea of how can I build rooms where people really get into contact with each other. So how can I have this social container where people connect to each other and really think together and speak from their heart and get into dialogue? And yeah, so in a way, more or less, I was flowing in this direction. I did a lot of things in my life, but that was always the thing I think that was calling me most.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. And isn't it funny how sometimes we have this, as you said, inner calling that haunts us,
Yeah.
independent of what we do in our lives, and it always shows up.
Mhm. Yeah.
And usually it starts very early in our life. I came
Yeah.
to realize.
Yes, Miriam, that's true. For me, that now I can see it. I haven't seen it for a long time, but in the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years, I started to see where all this comes from. This inner calling to build this kind of spaces is, of course, I was brought up in a family where both my parents they are 84 years old now. They were born in the middle of the Second World War. They got deeply traumatized and they are not academics. So what happened is I was brought up in a family where something like a dialogue on the dinner table was not something that was ever been experienced. It was more, there was not so much connection. And I think I always had more ideas in my mind and thoughts, and maybe I was a creative child. I don't know. I think every child is creative, right? And I had like thoughts and ideas that I couldn't share. And when I shared them, I was more like, okay, this is not interesting, or this is not true, and blah, blah. So I had a lot of questions and I didn't get any answers. And I didn't get any answers at school either, because school for me was also not such a nice experience, right? So like, where I felt like I have to repeat old wisdom or old knowledge. And this is what school is about. This is what life is about. And I always felt, in a way or another, that this is not what I'm here for. I had a lot of questions and I never got answers to that. And I even got like bad results at school because I couldn't repeat this old knowledge as good as it should be. So I was always good at languages and interested in languages because that's something that is vivid. But yeah, I had big problems in my early years. And like getting out of school, in a way, I had the feeling of, oh, maybe I'm not very intelligent. Or maybe I'm not very so, okay, yeah. So it took me a long time to discover that I have a lot of things to give, and that there is a lot in that kind of asking questions and exploring things together that opens my heart. And this is my profession.
Yeah.
Became my profession. Wow, what a big gift. Yeah. So
Beautiful.
maybe try to make it short, but I think this is a story that a lot of facilitators share. So
Yes,
um,
100%.
yeah.
100%. I can relate to the longing for something that wasn't there, the kind of conversations or connections, feeling part of a group,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the safe space. Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, and isn't it interesting how we then solve our own problems by creating it for others, basically? And I think this makes us then very sensitive to what it takes.
Yeah.
Because if you have missed that in the past as a child and growing up, you know exactly how it's supposed to feel in order to feel right.
Mhm. Yeah. In a way, yes. Yeah. And I think I'm getting 60 next year. So I'm already like an elder person, at least from my age. And I can feel this is exactly the core of everything.
Mm.
This is the longing for a real space where people really meet each other. And this and not apart from this downloading kind of conversation, which is also nice
Yeah.
and necessary, but really, yeah, to have
And-
this deep connection. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I hear wheel space, what I'm thinking of is a space where we can be real.
Mhm.
It's a space where we can put down the mask, um, and where it feels safe enough to be ourselves
Yeah.
and to have the conversations that are maybe difficult.
Yeah.
What is a real space for you?
A real space is something where we maybe start exploring something new.
Mm.
Huh? So when we are
Mhm.
in deep connection with ourselves and with the other persons around, and then having a good question, a good calling question, I think a lot can emerge from there. And that's, in a way, that's more real than repeating what we already know. Yeah.
Not the old wisdom, but the new wisdom
A
that is
new wisdom,
created.
because there's so much we need to understand. And if I look at the world where a lot of old stuff has been repeated over the last 150, 200 years, and where, of course, in a lot of new things also emerge, but maybe they came from a different place.
Mm.
It's not the place. I think we should ask ourselves, how can we serve ourselves,
Mm.
the world around us? How can we preserve it? How can we make our living, our economy, and everything in a way that our nature will grow? Yeah, in respect to what is nourishing us. Yeah. So in a way, it's so hard to understand that we are not going into these conversations
Mm.
to find new ways. Because I think in ancient, I'm quite interested in looking back in human history and finding out that the roots of societies in ancient times were always based on cooperation,
Mm.
on respect to the natural surrounding. That
Mhm.
was what people needed to survive.
Yeah.
And we lost that in a way. We
Yeah.
lost that. And I think we need these spaces to reconnect to this.
And what comes to my mind is the distinction, building on what you said before, between repeating old wisdom, which then seems absurd because it's not relevant anymore, as opposed to building on old wisdom,
Mhm.
standing on the shoulders of our ancestors to apply the wisdom to our new context and challenges. And for that, we first need to see,
Mhm.
to look and to see and to ask the right questions and to um, access the new wisdom, what's there.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I meant, maybe it's not the wisdom that we should forget. Maybe it's all the knowledge that seems to be relevant for our
Mm.
together. Maybe it's more reconnecting to old wisdom and building on that.
Yeah.
And I think I'm more meant like knowledge that
Mhm.
seems to be relevant. That is maybe not so relevant anymore.
And
Yeah.
then the wisdom being the intuition, also the
Yeah.
way how we connect to each other, maybe.
Mm. Yeah. Yes, I think so. And I sometimes I dream of a future or futures where we really care about each other. Where we live in a kind of life where we support each other and where cooperation and not competition is the dogma, you know.
Mm. And what do you think is
Big words, sorry,
yeah.
Miriam.
No, it's good. It's good. And I wonder what does it take to create that? Because as a facilitator, you're basically contributing and creating this microcosmos or this context where it can happen, where people can connect to each other, where they can have this dialogue.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, facilitation, to put it in short words, is the art of connection, focus, and binding commitment. So have a
Mm,
space where connection, focus, joint focus, meaning like we talk about the more or less the same thing. We understand what we are talking about, and
the
to
shared
build
purpose.
and to build binding commitment so that we really want to, not only talk but also do something after that. Yeah, yeah. So that's for me a short definition of what facilitation is.
I like that. And what I like about it is that it also distinguishes it from coaching, which is more inward looking and the healing and the personal growth, but less action oriented.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
binding commitments, at least for me, implies that it's a commitment, so there are several people involved and there's an action
Mhm.
that shall happen in the future.
Yeah, yes. Yes, this is why we are sitting together. There's always a
Mm.
purpose.
Yeah.
We want to reach something together. We want to do something together. Yeah. So for me, if you ask me how I create these spaces, a lot is pre-work.
Hmm.
The most important things that are happening is before anybody else is entering the room, right? So it's like the pre-work, get the right commitment with the clients to
Mm.
really have a partnership relation to that person's or person. And this is already the first really hard thing to do,
Yes.
to have like eye level contact. And it's easily said, but it's not easy to apply because sometimes they just come say and oh, please find a solution for this problem for me, and we say okay, yeah, we can do that together, but it's not a service that you're buying from me, it's something that we can reach together, that we can, so to have this relationship, to be clear in okay, I can, it's a process and it's a vessel, it's a social container, and we can only go there if we all agree on putting energy into it.
And everyone has to carry their share and their part in it.
Yeah, and especially if you go on big companies, they sometimes feel like, okay, facilitation, and then everything is fine. This is a problem to find out, okay, we have to step into this process together. And
Yeah.
how does it look like? And to
And
organize the process.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think where there is still a lot of work to do in terms of education is that clients want to buy facilitation because they have the idea, oh yes, it's a collaborative process. We have to get everyone into the same boat. And it sounds great in theory, but in practice, what they, I think, often want is just a consultant or advisor to tell them what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So this is for me, it's like really on eye level.
Hmm.
To get this contact on eye level means I don't know more than you, but also you don't know more than me.
Hmm.
On the other hand, there is people that feel, okay, I just need to brief the facilitator and then the person will do it. It's also not that.
Yeah, and then embrace the uncertainty and admit the responsibilities of what comes after.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot to do at the
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
Find out can I, with what my skills are, and can facilitation really be the right thing to do? And to put a lot of effort in clearing this space.
Mm-hmm.
One, or very often it's even a group of people that want me to facilitate a process for them, right? And at that point, I find it very important to practice the saying. Don't know if you know the book of Sandra Janoff and Marvin Weisbord with a "Don't just do something but stand there."
This has been my facilitation Bible for
Yes. And the principle 10, learn to say no if you want a yes to mean something.
Mm.
And this is so important,
Yeah.
really, to have the freedom to choose. And it's not always easy as a freelancer, I know. But yeah.
And I wonder, so I think the topic of boundary is maybe the topic of our times. Because also in companies, why don't they have time to do something after the workshop? Because they have too much to do because they are not saying no, or they are saying yes to the wrong things. And then I also wonder, as facilitators, building on what we discussed before, this longing for community, for connection, for appreciation, all the wounds from the past that led us on the track of becoming a facilitator. I think rejection is one of those things that many of us really struggle with. And then saying no, it's our shit. It's the inner work we haven't done if we cannot say no.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we really have to practice it. Miriam, something quite funny I used to say to the people I'm teaching, and I don't know how that sounds in English. I say it anyhow, right? I say, you know what? I go to bed with my clients.
Mm.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I dream of them. I dream of things that are the energies that are in a contract or in a project together. I meet them during the night. Yeah, they come to me with my dreams and how I sleep and how I feel. I'm thinking of the relationship and what is the project about when I'm under the shower, when I'm doing sports, when I do anything. So in a way, it's like I incorporate and I take them in.
Yeah.
And I don't want to use my energy for toxic kind of projects or
Even if you just don't
a lot.
care.
There's a
Yeah.
lot there's a lot out there. And it's not because people are unfriendly or whatever. It's more that they react out of a pattern that is not good for us.
Mm.
All this pressure and all that stuff around.
And I love that. How do you, I'm curious because I was just thinking, oh, there are so many kind of red flags that we can see along the way. What are for you? How do you spot that?
Mm.
That maybe the person, because the person can be very friendly, very nice, very kind, and still we sense, oh, that's a client you don't want to get involved with because of this toxic culture. How do you know?
Oh, there's two things. Oh, there's many things, but two important things. One is I learned to be very clear with my own response. Yeah, so I listen to the body signals I have. And so if I'm sitting with a person and my heart is beating and I'm feeling, oh, I don't know what to say. They want me to be very smart. They want me to blah, 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 blah. So if I feel like, if I have a bad feeling, then I'm getting more skeptical. Sometimes this will vanish after a while. So this is my inner response. And the other one is I always do pre-work with the groups I'm facilitating. We always have at least one meeting before. So that's the prep meeting or the preparatory meeting where I invite or where I ask to, sometimes very often it's in person. When it's a bit more far away, it can even be virtually, asked to come. So if it's a team, to say, okay, I'll come for 1 hour into your next team meeting. And then we will talk about the thing, about the process. We will see what your expectations are. And then we do something that we call the collective mind map. We're getting into details of the pre-work. And also during this and no, it's not, okay, sorry. I ask for this preparatory meeting. And if people are not open to invest this 1 hour, this is a very good sign of they're looking for
Quick
for
fix.
for a prescription, right? They just want to have something solved by an easy go. And so if they don't accept that this is part of my work, I say no.
Beautiful. And I love both red flags. The first one, I think, is something, and I'm so glad that you're saying that. It's something I think that we often dare to admit how important it is. If someone makes us feel small, something is wrong.
Mhm.
And I think in any relationship, we want to empower each other, we want to grow through each other. And if we feel not good enough or small or incapable in front of our potential client, something is off. And then rather trusting our gut that it's not about us, we are not small or not good enough.
Mhm.
Yeah. And if they are not willing to invest an hour upfront to do the preparation, yeah. Thank you.
Mm. Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether you wanted to go into the details of the prep work, because with the collective mind map, I could see some spark, but we don't have to go there.
Oh, if you want to, yeah, we can go there. This is a very important, actually, a very important way of working
Mhm.
that I'm also teaching a lot to those people that come to my academy. Is we're always doing the same thing. So this is structure, right? So a preparatory meeting is, and I've been written blogs about it, but it's most in German. I have to admit that. So what we do is we sit together with either the whole team, or if it's a larger group, as I'm also working with big groups, it might be just a representative group, right? So we sit together with maybe 15 people. We have a little check-in, and then we open the collective mind mapping with the day after. So I have at least you need 2 flip charts. This is the minimum, or better, it will be a pin board. And then I just make a little circle in the middle. I write the date of the day after our meeting or process. And then I invite people to think about, okay, just imagine it was a real success. So what is different the day after when it was a real success? So this is the, oh, I don't know the English words. So that's connected to Steve DeShazer's work of solution focused short time therapy, right? Here it is.
Mm.
So that's the wonder question, die Wunderfrage. I
Mm.
ask them, and then I just sit down and I ask people to get up, to write what they think, to read it out loud, and to sit down. And I'm not doing anything else. I'm just sitting there waiting, and I let people do it. And this is always something that unfolds there. If I have the privilege, or if I dare to really hold the silence sometimes.
Mm.
But then we collect everything that people believe is there after the day after, when it was really good.
Mhm.
And it has many very interesting things that happen when you're doing this. And let me try to explain 2 3 things. So people are getting connected with themselves and with the idea it was a good thing that we've done. So it's a positive breakthrough there. And also people understand each other and the whole thing better than before. And it maybe takes half an hour, maybe even an hour. Sometimes it takes long. And if you can hold the silence for 2 3 rounds, because there's always a one poof quick thing, and then there's a silence. If you can hold that, people are going deeper and deeper. And this is just a very interesting and magical thing that happens when we're doing this.
For walking us through. And I can see how this works also as a sort of manifestation. I think if we can imagine the small things that will be different,
Yeah.
then we are creating an anchor, so to speak, and then there's a higher likelihood that it will actually happen. It will inform the work that we'll do until then,
Mhm.
because we have a clear shared image. And I can see how you just standing there without doing something,
Exactly.
holding the silence, transfers the responsibility and the trust to the group, where everyone becomes part of the group because they have their moment of getting up, sharing. There's no judgment, there's no discussion. You create a sense of belonging. It's very little means. Beautiful.
Yeah. And in a way, I'm just sitting there waiting, doing nothing. They also feel what facilitation means for me. Get a sense of, oh, this is what she will do.
Yeah.
She will not help us in finding our topics or something. She will just ask and hold the space. That's also very valuable and helps a lot when you later on, some weeks later, sitting together in a room, you don't have to, because people always have projections on us to find their solution and really to have it clear. I'm here for process. All the content is yours. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it starts with something as small as, and I was never aware of it until Jerry mentioned it on the podcast, is giving away the pen. So they are writing their ideas on the mind map.
Exactly.
And hence they're holding the responsibility to capture it and to bring it to the world. It's not you.
Yeah. And I think when about 20 years ago, when I was working a lot with open space technology, I still do, but at that time we were a group of people here that got together collectively and formed a company around it called Boskop, the Berlin Open Space Cooperative. We were thinking a lot on how can we do less and be really radical, do less so that people can do it themselves.
So if you peel that onion or apple, isn't Boskop an apple?
It's an apple. Yes.
So if you peel the apple, all the complexity, all the taking space without adding, what is left then? So what is the pure facilitation?
I think it's this, what we call the holding space for trust. And in a way, on a very deep level, it's love, right? And it's trust and it's curiosity and it's compassion and courage. This is the space we're holding. And that's the magic in a way also. And now it sounds very spiritual. It has a very deep spiritual dimension. But on the other hand, we help groups to make their plans, to find their agreements, to work on really the things they need to do to go further together as a team or a company or a network or a group of activists. It can be anything, right? And so in a way, we do have business issues, real business issues. So there's a lot of methodologies we can use. Yeah, we can use liberating structures and we can use the big facilitative methods. But on the level below, it's always, this is what Sharma said, you are the most important tool. So it's a lot about from where we are working from. And if we can come from a place of abundance and love, yeah, this will be a place of abundance and love as much as it is possible for that moment.
Yeah.
So
And
it's woohoo.
it is, and I find it fascinating that it's so spiritual and woo-woo on the one hand, and so down to earth on the other. Or it's at the same time it coexists. And when I think of open space, what it boils down to is the trust and permission that people can stand up and offer their whatever they have to offer, and that it's okay. So the and I think exactly as you said, it's something that we have to genuinely feel so that everyone else can accept and grow into that. Because if there is judgment, or if there is no permission, or if there is no curiosity and care in an open space, nothing will happen. So what have you learned from your early days in experimenting with radical open space about your facilitation
Oh, wow.
with less
Oh, I
open,
learned a
with
lot.
structured spaces?
Mhm. I think the most important thing I learned, again, is something, an inner kind of thing, is that having a space where everybody can self-organize, there is this freedom and autonomy. I think it's autonomy, freedom and autonomy. Is it autonomy?
Autonomy?
Yeah, autonomy. So to have this open space as a person, and also it's also for us as facilitators, it can be very painful.
What's
Can
that?
be very painful in feeling, okay, now I have to rely on myself. So on the one hand, freedom is something that is great for us to have. On the other hand, is to find out your own with authority projections.
Mm.
So in my, like when I think 20 years ago, I had a lot of authority projections myself.
What do you mean by that?
I wanted someone to take care of me.
And to
No.
tell you what to do and to give you permission?
Yes, to give me
Mhm.
permission, to take care of me, to even like maybe give me a hug when I need it.
Reassure that it's all good and you're doing
Yeah,
great.
yeah. And wow, and at the beginning of open space, and when I learned this beautiful thing, and this is a real life changer for me, has always been, it really hooked me, and I found out, wow, life can be so easy in a way. And the more I got into it, the more I discovered my own discomfort with it.
Mm.
And now I would say I started to heal and I started to grow with that. But it was again an inner work.
Yeah.
And that was, I got this experiences came not by being a facilitator, because it's easy. It's easy to learn how to open space and then to hold it. And there's a lot of wisdom and it's so nice to do. But to learn all these things we are holding, we also need to be participants. We need to be hosted, right? And in being hosted, I was doing all this, I had all these experiment, no, wait. I all in being hosted, I felt so much my own need of be led by someone.
Mhm.
Yeah. And to become my own leader of my own life, that was a real that was the real work, right? So in a way, it's also so important to be hosted, to experience how it is to be in this place and to
Yes.
have a concern. And then you open a group and then you put your issue there and then nobody's coming. Okay. And that really feels bad at the beginning. And to really to experience it yourself. This makes a real facilitator. Yeah.
Yes.
And not only just facilitating others. So now I'm touching on very different concepts, but this was my way. This is I learned most about things that didn't work, and I have been facilitating open spaces that it wasn't a lot. It was just one, but that didn't work. And to understand what happened, why it didn't work. Of course, it was the pre-work and the preconditions that were not right. I should have said no.
Mhm.
Again, the same thing. And also to experience myself being in open space as a participant with something that is burning inside me, and how insecure I can feel and how more secure I will get over the time doing it. So it's a practice,
Yes.
it's a practice.
And I agree 100% that we learn as much from participating as we do from practicing. And because that's where it gets vulnerable. As a facilitator, we can perfectly hide behind the structures and the instructions, and it's so easy to tap into their vulnerability.
Mm.
And I would be very curious if you're open to share about what went wrong in the open space,
Mhm.
because I think there is a lot we can learn in general of how do we how do we create the structures that create the freedom for stuff to happen? And how can we stop? And I think many of it, and then hopefully this will be the bridge to the inner work. I think there's a lot of things we do unconsciously that become obstacles to the process or the collaboration, creativity?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I was writing a book on facilitation, and I was writing about it in the book, what made me fail in the past. And I think we should talk about this a lot because I think like, why do maybe others will not use like 20 years to really to get the point of facilitation. So that's good. It's so important to talk about it and to share it. Yeah. And for me, I don't want to go into details because that might not be so interesting. But in the past, when things were not really perfect or even did not go right, and of course, there was this open space where we created a great space and everything, and nobody was coming. Yeah, that was a thing. And that at that moment, that's maybe 20 years ago, I felt like I will never do this again. It's so awful. There were just 3, 4 people coming, and I was doing everything. And then they also posted some issues, but then they went away and other people came. Okay, but this is a story, right? But if I condense these kind of stories, and they're not all as awful as this one, um, there has been some things in the past where I learned I should have said no. And one is when I'm a bit hooked by the methodology. I remember the first group who was asking me if I can facilitate a dynamic facilitation session. I was so much, oh, yes, I have always wanted to try this. And it worked. But at the end, something else would have been much better.
What is dynamic facilitation?
Dynamic facilitation is a facilitative process where you are breaking the idea of that things go in the direct way. So you're working on sequences. What you have is 5 flip charts with let me see if I get it all together. One is, what is the challenge? What ideas do we have? What assumptions do we have? What constraints might we meet? And then maybe a fifth one. I don't get everything right, but the facilitator is mostly doing just people are talking and the facilitator is listening, maybe asking questions to get things more straight, and then just writes down everything people say. So it's a non-linear, great, really nice methodology to maybe get a breakthrough in issues and topics that are really difficult. I'm not using it a lot, so I'm not a specialist on dynamic facilitation.
I was just curious, and I think this could be an entire conversation as such, because I
Yes.
think it can be very powerful under some circumstances, and I can see it turning into a disaster and many others. Anyway, when you get
This
hooked
is
about
dynamic facilitation. So that was one thing. I was get caught by an idea of, oh, I could use this methodology. The one was
shiny
I
object
was
syndrome.
I was flattered by let's say by the clients shining. Sometimes there's like really interesting clients where you see, oh, they're really doing great work. I would love to them, it's feel I can put it here. I have been working for blah blah blah.
Badge, yeah.
A badge. And another one is, of course, there are times of economic crisis where you feel like I need to take this job, or maybe it's a very well paid job. This is also a big trap that we should try to avoid. Another one is when I know the person personally and I don't see clear enough things that they don't see. And this is a lot about the partnership with the client, right? If we know each other, I might not be able to see things that I can see when I don't know the person.
And maybe we don't ask the questions, the uncomfortable questions, because of, oh, maybe we want to protect them, or we project and assume that we understand, although we actually don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's actually an interesting one. I recently had a project with someone I knew and was really excited, and then realized that the difficulty, because there's suddenly expectations also of how to spend time, how to communicate. And I have the impression with someone we don't know we tend to communicate more because we don't assume, and we have all these, we stick more to the process.
Yes. And we are more connected to ourselves, I think, because the relationship, if I ask you a very uncomfortable question, I'm in risk to lose the friendship or the loyalty or whatever. So there is a social risk. Yeah, exactly what you say. I think that's a big trap. And I've been in that, like every one of us has been in it. And it can be great, but it can be also a big challenge. So when I look at all the failures I had in the past, this was one of them. Yeah. This was one of the reasons. Yeah. Yes. So
When you teach facilitation,
yeah.
where do you start? What do you think are the fundamentals that need to be there and that maybe we often overlook?
Yeah. We already talked about one thing, and this is the relation to the client.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we start with after getting to know each other. And we try to put a bit of energy into it to understand this kind of thing. And the second one is, this is the nature of human beings being self-organized. This is the don't just do something but stand there approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so fundamental to understand that we are not machines, but that we are living creatures and living systems that are complex and interrelated. So
What is the opportunity and what's the trap in that?
the opportunity is to really open space for a living process and to understand that, for example, to define goals of a process is already a process.
Mm-hmm.
And that we need to talk about with those people that are involved and not only the leader, for example. This is the reason why this preparatory meeting is so important.
Mm.
And also to understand that it's systems thinking a lot, right? So if a team is having a problem and they project it on one person, that it is not the person itself most of the time, that it is a structural problem most of the time, and that this person is maybe just something like okay, das müssen wir rausnehmen.
Scapegoat.
Yeah. So that to understand that a team is a team, and this is it, then that not one single element of the team is a problem, but that,
Yeah.
that the team is having an issue. Right.
And yes, can I double click on that? I think it's fascinating, especially the way how I observe this. And I'm not working with teams on longer projects, so I'm far from being an expert in that. I'm really curious. I can imagine that it's something that you see very quickly because you have seen so many teams, you have done this work for so many years, and like, oh, this dynamic, I see exactly what's going on. But they don't see it. For them, it's very clear that this one person
Mm-hmm.
is the problem to all of the things going on. So how do you warm up a team to see?
Hmm. I think there was something in what you just said that struck me is I don't see this dynamic. It's not, I'm not having this analytical kind of thought and look on my clients in a way. It's more that this is what comes as assumptions for many people when they have a conflict, that it is a personal problem.
Mm.
Try to have this systemic view on, of course, sometimes there are teams that might not match together, but to see behind it, what is the reason? We're not dealing personal problems in workshops. This is also a very important thing. So it's a lot about the pre-work as well, mostly with a leader. I've had that a long time ago. People say, we have a problem with this and that person, and please, can you do something about it? This is not something that happens many times, but there is an assumption very often behind people's thinking that you know, and this is this mechanical way of thinking. The problem is it's a different one. We are very formed or influenced. We are very influenced by a very mechanical way of thinking. This came maybe up 150 years ago or a bit more, to start thinking in a mechanical way. So if you do this, then this will happen. If you do that, then this will happen. And this person is the problem, the rest is fine. And this is one person can put the goal, and that's fine. And then everybody will just follow. And our world is different. We start understanding more and more that we have to come back to this kind of understand the systemic way of looking at the world, that we are living creatures and that it's not as mechanical as we think. And this has a lot of implications. And not to look at one person, but to look on the relationships people have to each other, right? So this is basic systemic thinking. And to be very clear on that, this is the way we work. So it's not as, okay, I see this and then I do that. It's more the way we're always working all the time, is allowing this other way of thinking to be very clear in the workshops. And I might not be very clear for the moment. I'm sorry, but I can't explain it differently.
And I can see the complexity and also the tension between, on the one hand, looking at the system and the roles we play,
Yeah.
and the meta level, so to speak, while at the same time inviting people to be real and to be vulnerable and to be human, and then say, okay, the problems we have are not related to our humanness, but to the system.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very complex work.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And what makes it easy for me after all these years is I don't have to have any solution. I don't have to have any answer, but I'm opening the space, and I'm holding the space for the people I work with to investigate it themselves and to find out and to analyze and to find out the way they can work better together, or yeah, find their strategies or ways of working.
Yeah.
And to be really clear in this role, this is a big challenge. And that's also, to come back to your question, what do I teach for facilitation, is to be really clear in this role, because there's so many invitations all along the way of working together for people to ask, oh, what do you think about it? How are we progressing? What do you think about our way of working together and all that stuff? And of course, I sometimes do have ideas. And then, or even sometimes I step out of the role and say, okay, if you ask me, I can give you an idea on how you can have a look on it and then see how that resonates with you. But always, always just as an invitation, is that something for you? And then, okay, work with it. And if it's not, okay, I just let it fall down. That was just an idea. And then go back into this, okay, what's the next step we're going here? This is like a dance, and be really clear. My own role is only process, and I can help you understand, and I don't have to understand anything.
Yeah, the leaving the responsibility, autonomy, permission to the others. And yeah, back to, I think that's a moment where everyone comes with their baggage of, who am I to? Do I have permission? And then, especially when it comes to permission, there are those who usually take more permission than they actually, it's healthy. And those who are not taking enough, but there are always these stories around that. And I think then the grasping, or the trying to find support from the facilitators, part of that. Oh, please tell me whether it's good enough, whether I'm performing well, doing well.
Yeah. So I think a good way always is to have really a lot of interaction in the room. So when people talk to each other, when they reflect on it, the pair or doing whatever you're doing, it can be a liberating structure, it can be just a circle or something. So to hear everyone, to give everyone space for expressing themselves, either in the big group or in a smaller group, and doing this a lot during the day. and not forgetting that we also need a convergence at the end, right? So it's a dance, but the most important thing is to really let people to connect to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always makes a big change. Yeah. And if I see, if we're also teaching leaders to become facilitative leaders and to give them this for their meetings instead of telling, is asking questions and then listening and let people talk to each other. This sounds so easy, but it's not. And it sounds what can that make a difference? But it makes a big difference.
Yes. And again, there are so many stories around that. Companies where it's not normal to ask questions, where asking a question is associated to not knowing the answer and being weak.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you think do most leaders get wrong about leadership when it comes to the lens of facilitative leadership?
Mhm. Maybe it's exactly this, that they need to have the answer. There's two things, is leaders that are trained are quite a lot trained into how to treat persons in when they have a one-to-one meeting. So this kind of, how can I lead personnel? But they're not trained on how to lead a collective.
Mm.
Yeah. And this is where facilitation comes into the scene, right? So they're very focused on persons and not on the group. And when they are focused on the group, they might have the idea of that they do have to do everything. That is overwhelming. That's putting too much on their shoulders. So just having the idea of how can I support this group to really support each other, yeah, and to cooperate in a good way for our joint purpose. So it's a lot about to communicate the vision and to allow a collective to be built.
Yeah.
And many leaders don't get any education into this in this direction.
Yes. And what just came to my mind is this: back in the days, leaders got presentation skills training. So it's communicating one to many,
Yeah.
which was important at the time. That became better. And then it's leaders as coaches. That's what you just said, the one-on-one. How can I really onboard one person and be there for them? And the next step now that is missing and that you are filling is the leaders as facilitators, one with many, not one
Yeah.
too many.
Yeah, exactly. One with many. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
That's true.
What remains your facilitation challenge after all these years?
Oh, yeah. We're talking about safer spaces, braver, safer spaces. And I think this is a quite a long journey already. And it's a very intensive journey to understand my limitations in seeing other people's obstacles in the room. Because most obstacles people have in fully participating and being there with full heart and full mind and blah, 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 is not visible. And in a way, at least I have always thought that in doing the work we're doing, we're inviting everyone to join, and that's enough, to be honest, right? And this is what you read in every book. And we all want participation, we all want freedom and love and blah, blah, blah. And we can only see or understand or feel obstacles of people when we have, in a way, heard it and learned from them and be open to learn from others. So what I mean is, if a person is in a wheelchair, it's of course obvious that I need to take care of that. This person can write on the whiteboard and can access the room and all that stuff. And with other people, it might be also obvious that they might need some kind of protection in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many things in the room, starting with neurodiversity, starting with all things that come with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So people experience very different discrimination when they grow up and in their daily life, right? And so this is all touching the issue of diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very painful, I think it's a very painful issue, because this is why I want this, I'm doing this job, right? This is why I'm a facilitator, because I want the world be more fair at that point, and to put down the boundaries of participation for people. And the more I'm dealing with the subject, the more I see all the things I don't see. And that makes me really, sometimes really, it's a hard thing. And I do have a wicked questions. I don't know if you know the wicked question of the, I found out my wicked question in this issue since about 2 years now. Yeah, is, so now here comes my wicked question. How can I fully trust the potential of a group and let them do without interfering, and at the same time protect individuals from structural discrimination, full stop or question mark? So how can I be a real how can I be 100% in my facilitative approach in letting them do, and also helping others or protecting others from this kind of structural discrimination that is always there? And it breaks my heart to see that there are so less answers yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this constant, thank you for sharing this wicked question. And I'm sure that the audience will now drift in their own pondering, wondering. And related to that, what came up for me is also the wicked question, how can I be the authentic self that actually invites everyone to be authentic and to feel safe, while paying attention not to discriminate unconsciously or
Yeah.
exclude through my language and through my gestures. And I think it's similar, that I always have the impression there's so many things we can do wrong. But the moment where we are too careful, we become so stiff that it's not fun and it's not inspiring.
Yes, Miriam, there's even another layer on that. And this is, it's not so much about me, because I can work on my language, I can work blah, 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 blah. It's a lot about them. If I let them do, not
So,
interfere
okay.
in the way they are interacting to each other, how can I
Mm.
protect those that are vulnerable in the room in being discriminated by another person?
Without putting a million rules and structures and limitations. You're
And
not allowed to say this and you're supposed to say that, and please smile and do that.
this
Oh,
is,
yeah.
yeah,
That's an entire different
for me,
level.
yeah. And still more questions than answers on that.
Yeah. And I think that's why it makes sense to work with groups as a process, because that's also something that you grow into.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot about growing and healing, and to be humble.
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
have answers. I can just learn. And since I have found this wicked question, since I'm really can feel all that inside me, I'm learning so much from people, because they come over, they tell me about their constraints, about what is really hard for them to do and what they need. And so I really listen.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's very helpful. And
Yeah,
there
very.
are very little people that write about it. There is many, of course, there's so many activism in this field, but not a lot of them feel themselves as a facilitator. There's a lot of trainers who do like anti-bias trainings and all this kind of stuff, but this is training. This is not facilitation. And there's not so many people. And there's at least, I think I only met one or found one person who is writing about these issues. And this is Adrienne Marie Brown.
Mm.
I don't know if you heard about her. She's a Black
Yeah.
activist
Yeah.
from Detroit, I think.
Yeah.
And she's writing about it from the angle, from the perspective as a facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really helpful, what she's writing. And but that's the only one. All, as I would say, all the rest of us being academic, white, yeah, with much more privileges, I think none of us is really writing about it a lot.
Mm.
Because it's a question of consciousness and yeah.
And lived experience.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think it's, in theory, it's very different as if you're affected and
Exactly.
you're in it.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
only
So
person who looks different or feels different.
this
Yeah.
is why I say we have to learn, and we can learn so much. And I'm so happy about people like Adrienne Marie Brown doing all this work and publishing all this stuff and being so clear.
Mm.
Yeah. So we have to listen to them.
Thank you.
Mm.
What is something that you wish you had known before? One advice you would give someone who just starts?
Yeah. So the advice I could give is it's really more about you than you think.
Mm.
So we think it's about business plans and blah, 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 and doing all this kind of business work or to be trained in the right methodologies. But it is much more inner work than you think. Maybe it's even much more than I think. Maybe it's much more than we can imagine. It's a lot about inner work, being capable of holding space for others and being also attractive as a facilitator.
Yeah. Once we overcome our inner biases, limitations, then we become open for something external. And I asked the question a previous guest this week already, and as she spoke about healing, and you also spoke about healing. What do you mean when you say healing?
Hmm. This is becoming my true self.
Mm.
And there's so many wounds everywhere that prevent me in being my own self, my true self, or even a higher self, because I think we all have much more potential than what we live. And I'm with potential in being kind, humble, compassionate, have compassion, and connect with others on a cooperative basis.
Mm.
Yeah. So this is what I mean by healing, is becoming this person that we maybe have been as a child.
Getting rid of the protective layers.
Yeah, and all our stress patterns and all our, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah. That's healing for me.
Thank you. Yeah, resonates a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The hard work
Yeah,
of becoming real.
yeah, true.
Thank you so much, Jutta.
Mm. You're welcome. Thank you for this conversation.
Mm.
My heart is really big and warm and wobbling. It's good.
Yes, same here.
Mm.